Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another painting tutorial, this time showing you how to save over $131 on painting up your miniature for Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress UR025. UR025 is a playable character that is a man of iron, and it's a very cool looking miniature as well, and we're going to paint this guy up using some very cheap craft paints that are available at your local Walmart and Hobby Lobby. At the same time, we're going to save you $131.73. And the reason why we know this is because, assuming that you're purchasing everything for the very first time, the materials we're going to recommend to paint up this miniature is going to cost you a grand total of $25.87. And when you compare that from materials that you need to buy from Citadel as well as Army Painter, that's going to cost you $157.24, which is a heck of a lot more expensive. I think even more expensive than the starting box set this miniature actually came in. So because of that, we're going to show you guys how to quickly and cheaply paint this guy using some really cheap craft paints. So let's get this video on a roll. So the first thing we gotta do, of course, is to assemble the miniature as well as to prime the miniature as well. Now for me, of course, I decided to use a can of cheap Krylon spray paint. It's called Cerulean Blue is what it's called, and I got this at my local Walmart for about $3.99. And the reason why I chose this color is because this miniature from the boxer has kind of like this pale, kind of faded blue armor plating that's all over the miniature, and I decided to do this real quick because it would mainly take care of most of the miniature in one single go. You just spray this all over the entirety of the miniature and you're ready to start putting paint on it as well. So it does a really good job priming and also base coating your miniature, so that part was absolutely fantastic. Immediately afterwards, we go to do a real quick dry brush real quick with some Dutch Aqua by Folk Art. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 75 cents. We just do a quick dry brushing all over the entirety of the miniature, and what it does, of course, it does a couple of things. First, it creates the illusion of depth on the miniature because what ends up happening is that the pigments of the individual paint actually adheres to the raised surfaces of the miniature while leaving that darker color in the recesses. This kind of creates the idea that there is a depth in your miniature, as well as creating some highlighting, and makes it very easy to do so. Traditionally speaking, whenever you choose a dry brushing color, you want to use a color that is a pastel version of whatever base coat it is to create that nice little contrast on it. And as you can see, a lot of the details that we couldn't see before have now been revealed through the dry brushing. So just do a quick dry brush with this real fast, and then we're ready to move on for our base coats. Now, as crazy as it may sound, UR025 actually has a very limited palette when it comes to this miniature, so it's going to be very easy to paint this guy very quickly. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is the dome that makes up his head. On the boxer, he does have like this off-white colored armor paneling on his head, but because of that, white's a very difficult color to use because it's very transparent. So in order to solve this problem, we're going to use pale gray instead by Folk Art, which costs 75 cents at your local Walmart. Now, the reason why we're using this pale gray color from Folk Art is because it has very much a strong off-white color, but because it is more opaque than white and not nearly as transparent, we don't need to spend as many coats to put this on the miniature. In fact, we can do it in just 2 thin coats, which is actually quite nice, which tells you how much of a great product that Folk Art's Pale Gray really is. Now, as for the gauntlet that's on his right hand side for the power claw that it has this bright orange power claw, so we're going to use Ripe Tomato by Apple Barrel Paint. Now, that one is going to take about 3, maybe 4 coats as much, and the reason why is because orange, unfortunately, is pretty transparent as well. But once you have those base coats down for the main armor paneling, next we got to do now is a dry brush. So the dry brush we're going to use is called Tropic Orange. It's made by Apple Barrel Paint. It costs 50 cents at your local Walmart. I'm just going to do a quick dry brush directly on the orange power claw that's on the right hand side of UR025. It's a really quick color to put on there, and at the same time creates a lot of depth as well. As you can see in the background, I was painting up some Beastmen at the same time I was painting this guy up. In fact, I was going through the studio's Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress collection when I was actually painting up this miniature as well. Now, as weird as it may sound, most of this miniature has actually been painted. We just got a few details we got to pick out real fast, and this miniature is almost done. The first thing we're going to pick out real quick are some of the individual details on this miniature as well. Primarily the light bulbs that it actually has on his chest as well as his shoulder to kind of create that illumination as well. We also have some buttons and some diodes on the front armor panel of the miniature as well as on its power pack that's on its back. Now, for these colors, we're going to use True Red by Anita's Acrylic. You can get that at your local Walmart, Hobby Lobby, or Walmart for about 65 cents. It's a beautiful red color. And we're going to use some of the little light emitting diodes, as well as some of the grips like the handle on his chest rig, as well as that thin layer of red right on the visor of his helmet as well. We're also going to use King's Gold by Apple Paint, which costs you 50 cents at your local Walmart for the giant spotlight on his chest, as well as the spotlight that's on his shoulder. And I didn't take a picture of this, so I do apologize for this, but you will see this later on when we talk about the metallic colors. We're also going to paint some of the buttons on the back of this power unit by picking those on 2 thin layers of Holly Branch made by Apple Paint, and only costs 50 cents as well. So now that we're done painting on the little details, next thing I gotta do now is focus on the metallics. Now, aside from the blue paint that's on the armor paneling, the next major detail is going to be the armor that this guy actually has as well. The blue armor actually rests upon a metallic endoskeleton, is actually how this miniature is designed. So because of that, the recessed parts of the miniature, like the joints, for example, and the mechanical parts, we're just going to pick that in 2 thin layers of gunmetal gray by Folk Art. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 75 cents. It's a beautiful dark steel gray color, and I just painted this entirely all over the endoskeleton of UR025. In fact, I'm going to show you guys exactly what this looks like in the front. So for example, the armpits, beneath the pauldrons, the space between the thigh plates, as well as his legs, as well as a huge assault cannon it's got on his left arm, as well as his power pack on the back as well. I'll show you a little bit more details when I actually turn this miniature around, when we actually show the back of this miniature as well. And then lastly, of course, we're going to pick out some of the gold details. There's actually a few gold details, primarily they're Imperial Aquilas, it looks like, that are on this miniature, like on the chest, for example. So the parts I want it done in gold, I just picked out in 2 thin layers of Deco Arts Emperor's Gold. You can get this at your local Hot Walmart for about 65 cents. It's a beautiful, cheap alternative to Retributor armor. In fact, it does exactly the same thing and only costs pennies on the dollar. So we're going to flip this miniature around so that way you can see the back of the endoskeleton. As you can see, we have some exposed endoskeleton parts in the back of the legs, as well as some of the ammo containers for the flamer that's in his assault claw, as well as the autocannon on his left-hand arm as well. And in fact, in order to pick up that detail, we're going to pick out a fuel line that connects from the fuel pack on the back of UR025 to the flamer on his assault claw. And we're going to pick out that detail in 2 thin layers of copper by Folk Art. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 75 cents. And it's a beautiful alternative to Screaming Bill made by made by Citadel, and it costs, I think, like 10 times less. So it's 10 times cheaper, which makes it a really, really great product in order to create that overall look. And the last thing we do with this miniature before we start working on the base is to actually dry brush the entire miniature again. And the reason why we're going to dry brush the entirety of the miniature is because UR025 is a man of iron. Now, according to the lore, I believe what that means that this guy is like something around 10,000 years old, or maybe even older, I believe. I think UR025 is supposed to be around before the Empire, I think. I don't really quote me on that. But anyways, to make it look like he's older, we're going to make it look like his weathering is taking place on his armor panels as well as on his weaponry. So to do that, we're going to dry brush the entirety of the miniature, all parts of it, with a thin layer of Silver Anniversary Silver by Folk Art. It's a bright bluish silver color that you can get at your local Walmart for about 75 cents. And we're going to dry brush this all over the miniature to make it look like it's been weathered and worn over the years, like some of the armor has started to scrape off and been weathered away as it's been traveling around through I guess you would call it the Blackstone Fortress, I guess is what you would call it. But anyway, so that's basically what we're doing for that, to create that weathered look on the miniature. Now, the next thing we're going to work on for UR025 is the base. Now, we got a little bit of texturing that I use on the base, which is basically a mixture of wood glue and sand. I just apply wood glue over the base, cover the part of the base I want texturing with sand, let it dry, and then I do a quick little slurry mixture, a 50-50 mixture between wood glue and water, and apply it like a wash in order to create an airtight sealant on that texturing. So to create that textured look, we're going to actually paint it in 2 thin layers of pigment paint by Apple Paint. It costs about 50 cents at your local Walmart. It's a beautiful alternative to Eshin Gray, which is made by Games Workshop, and it does exactly the same thing. And we're going to put 2 thin layers of this pigment paint as a base coat on the miniature. And after the pigment paint dries, we're going to dry brush it real quick to create that textured look. So the first thing we're going to do, actually, we're going to dry brush the base with pewter gray made by Apple Paint. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 50 cents. And then we're going to dry brush that and create the raised surfaces to create some depth on the base. They're going to do exactly the same thing with the pale gray by Folk Art and put it directly on top of the base as well. And once we get done brushing the base, the next thing we do, of course, is an oil wash. So we're going to wash the entire miniature in Midwax Polyshade Acrylic in Mission Oak color. You can get this wood stain at your local Walmart for about $6.99. And the reason why I like using that product is because, unlike Army Painter Strong Tone, it is 5 times cheaper. It does exactly the same thing as Army Painter Strong Tone does, but it costs a lot less, and that's the reason why I love using this product. Now, the thing you got to remember about this oil wash is that this oil wash is going to seep into the recess of the miniature. It's going to bring a lot of those details we couldn't see earlier, like, for example, the individual rivets on the armor paneling, as well as the armor joints between the armor paneling as well. It's also going to mute down the vibrancy of our colors as well, so instead of being so bright and technicolor like it looked before, it actually makes it look more muted and more grimdark as it dries. And the third thing that it also does too is it also smooths out the transitions between our dry brushing as well as our base coating, so that we have a much more smoother overall finish. Now you will need to wait for this stuff to dry and cure for 24 hours, and the reason why is because there is polyurethane in this wood stain. It's going to do a beautiful job of actually protecting your miniature from the elements and from being weathered, worn, and chipped, so that is a nice part, but you do have to wait 24 hours for that stuff to dry and cure in order for it to harden properly. And as you can see, this is what the miniature looks like after the curing process over with. It has a beautiful job bringing those details we couldn't see before. Now, it will have this high gloss finish, which could be kind of distracting, but if you're a fan of that high gloss finish, you can, of course, just ignore this next step. But for the first thing we're going to do real quick is we're going to rim the base. I rimmed the base in 2 thin layers of Skyline by Folk Art. It costs about 75 cents at your local Walmart or Hobby Lobby. I like using this color for all of the miniatures in our studio's collection for our Necromunda miniatures, just because I think it's a nice kind of urban neutral color that makes the miniature really pop and stand out. And the very last step we're going to take, of course, is to do a spray varnish. This step, of course, is completely optional. You don't need to do this if you don't want to. I like to do this because I like more of a matte finish on my miniatures. I'm just going to spray that real quick all over the entire of the miniature to mute out that sheen and bring a lot of those details. And just like that, this miniature is now fully completed. So this is the end result for UR025 from the Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress. As you can see, it's a beautiful tabletop standard, and this guy is ready to throw down in the depths of the Blackstone Fortress, or in my case, I'm using it for Necromunda because these Blackstone Fortress miniatures are perfect for the Necromunda setting, in my opinion. So now that we're done talking about exactly how we paint up this miniature, let's go and talk about the materials that you need to buy from Army Painter as well as from Citadel if you want to achieve the exact same results we did, but using their name brand products instead. Alright, so let's go and talk about the Army Painter Strong Tone, Army Painter as well as Citadel method of actually doing this. You'll need to buy a can of Army Painter spray, which is called Crystal Blue. It's going to cost you $17.99. You're also going to need the colors Averland Sunset, Caliban Green, Luganeth Orange, Slanesh Gray, Eshin Gray, Troll Slayer Orange, and Mephiston Red. All these colors are, of course, made by Games Workshop Citadel line, and each of these costs $4.55 per pot. Now, you're also going to need to buy Lead Belcher Screen Bell as well as Iron Breaker. Those metallic colors cost $7.80 as well as Rust Gray, Ulthuan Gray, and those are going to cost $4.55 for those colors. You also need to buy pots of Aethermatic Blue as well as Retributor Armor, which costs $7.80 for that. To do the quick oil wash that we did, you need to buy a can of Army Painter Strong Tone for $32, as well as a can of Mutatorium Varnish for the matte finish for $19.50. And then finally, you have to have Astral Granite for the texturing, which is going to cost $7.80. So assuming that you're purchasing everything from Army Painter and Citadel for the very first time, you're talking about a grand total investment of $157.24 in order to paint up UR025 the same way we did, but using the Army Painter as well as the Citadel materials instead. Whereas if you go with the cheap stuff that we use on my channel, the Cheapskate tool is going to be $25.87, which is going to net you a savings of $131.37. So there you guys go. That's how you guys go about quickly and cheaply paint up UR025 from Blackstone Fortress. Alright you guys, so if you're looking for some way to save money on your miniature wargaming hobby, may I suggest using some cheap craft paints in lieu of the more expensive name brand paints. I know I keep on making these cheap shop videos about paints, but that's because for me that's the #1 way I know how to save you guys money aside from using proxies and different third-party stuff for miniatures and for building your own terrain and things of that nature. Paint is like the #2 thing that most players actually spend their money on when it comes to painting up their miniatures, and so because that helped alleviate the cost of that, may I suggest using some cheap craft paints. It does exactly the same thing as name brand stuff, and in some cases it might work even a little better because it's also significantly cheaper. So that's good for those of you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all these greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, you guys. I will catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.